Hello, everyone. Peace and blessings to all of you. I pray that you are well and blessed. Welcome to our new and returning listeners. I believe this message tonight is going to be a blessing to you. I'm doing it in a different format for the most part. I have some video clips that I want to share with you regarding this topic that we're talking about, the fallen and their descendants. So we're talking about ancient bloodlines because there are some things that we need to know. And as you know, I have been talking about Daniel and the fourth beast from his vision, its religion and its people. So the information may be sensitive for some, but when you consider how these folks just come out of their mouths with their supremacist nonsense, it should reaffirm our commitment to set the record straight and clap back at them. Did you all hear about this guy, Elijah Schaefer? Listen to what he said. He said, Black people are not Americans because originally they were slaves. Amendments were made, and then there was adjustments that gave you citizenship and the right to vote, but that didn't make you an American. It just gave you an American citizenship. And he wasn't finished. He said, that's not to say that Black people aren't valuable in the eyes of God. That's not to say white people are better than Black people, even if they are. Just kidding. Now, do you really believe he was just kidding when he said that? No, he wasn't kidding, because that has been the mindset for hundreds of years. It hasn't changed. Out of the heart, the mouth speaketh. First, they try to separate you from the nation as one who does not belong, therefore, you have no rights. Then they try to separate you from humanity, and you don't deserve basic human rights. So, what is an American exactly? Now, some of the folks he palled around with are so called Black people. Are they Americans? No, because for this man, an American is an Aryan, a white Christian, and we need to get this. A lot of folks are going to have their Ramaswamy moment and get a wake up call very soon. Let's not forget that they did not treat our ancestors who converted to Christianity any better than the other enslaved folks. In their eyes, they were all like chattel. But there are those who will come to this channel and get upset when we expose the truth about European history. We should just walk in love. God loves everybody. We need to just turn the other cheek. It's always us who should turn the other cheek. When will they turn the other cheek? Now, those days are over, family. But I need to ask you something in reference to his comment. Is this setting us up for something later? Are we African Americans? Think about it. Now, he's saying it because of his supremacist views, but is there some truth to the statement? That's something to think about. So, we're going to dig into this because the truth about European lineage is finally being revealed. Scientists found that they share a common ancestry that can be traced back to three main ancient inhabitants: the Eurasian hunter gatherers, the Middle Eastern farmers, and the Indo-Europeans. However, there is a mysterious link that is often overlooked: their connection to the fallen. So we're going to take a look behind the veil, because there's a bloodline in the earth that did not come from Adam. The descendants of the fallen focused on their maternal bloodline because it gave them legitimacy, but they hid their connection to the fallen. But I believe they have enough things in place now to make their big reveal and acknowledge their paternal bloodline. They're ready to introduce the sky people. Others call them Anunnaki, or the sky gods. We're talking about the Watchers, who were fallen angels and their descendants, and they infiltrated various ancient cultures, to include Egypt. Now, there are some who still grapple with Genesis 6. They will not accept the fact that there were rebellious angels who mated with the daughters of men, and giants were born as a result of their union. They were hybrid beings, the ones the Most High told Israel to wipe out. So let's look at this verse from 2 Samuel 21:20. And there was yet a battle in Gath, where was a man of great stature that had on every hand 6 fingers, and on every foot 6 toes, 24 in number. And he also was born to the giant. So we can clearly see the abnormality here. These are hybrids. How do you explain that? Who fathered Goliath? Who fathered Og? These hybrids had children, and that bloodline is still on the earth. They're ruling things behind the scenes. They operate in secret. And yes, the seed of Esau is mixed in with them as well. Now, I want to share some information from the video clips, as I mentioned. And she did her research. The person that I'm talking about is Leuren Moret. She was on Professor Hamamoto's channel, and the link is here if you want to watch the full video. I really encourage it. It's quite long, really. But someone sent this to me some time ago, and I get a lot of material asking me to look over certain things, and I really don't have time to watch them all, but there are some that will catch my eye that I'll put on a back burner if I think it's something that I will need to refer to later. And this was one of them. And I thank the person who sent this to me. I just can't remember who it was. It's been so long. But this woman, Leuren Moret, is an independent scientist and a whistleblower. And she's known as the world's foremost expert on depleted uranium. In the interview, she shares information on the elite groups and their ancient bloodlines. And you need to know that for these folks who are in academia, they lose funding for research. Some of them lose their positions. Some are taken out when they get off script, because the enemy wants to operate in secrecy. They don't want things released too soon. It has to be wrapped up in a pretty package so that people will accept it. So by the time they get ready to release it, they'll have everything in place, particularly as we see the big release about transhumanism. Folks will be lining up for it. Think about how they coerce people to drink the Kool-Aid. They have a slick marketing campaign, so they will have everything ready for that. So she's talking about these ancient bloodlines, and these are the bloodlines I'm referring to here, or she's referring to. There's 10 of them, and she traced them all the way back to Mesopotamia. She found the connection between them and the Ish people, the Roman Catholic Church, and the royal families. And as I said, Esau's in there as well. But she believes that the connection between them is the Iranian bloodline, the ancient Iranian bloodline. Now, I've been talking about the Yamnaya people, the Indo-Europeans, Teutonic or Germanic peoples, and of course the Ages. They're all connected in various ways. The Indo-Europeans migrated from their homeland and basically wiped out the indigenous people who were living in those territories, including Persia. So sources say that these Indo-European Aryans arrived in Iran about 4,000 years ago and originally inhabited the Western Iranian plateau. So I'm going to show the first video and then I'll come back and talk about it.
So they, in the mainstream media, they reported an official satanic group,
right,
organized group, was going down to Louisiana to do a satanic ritual for the city council.
right,
and it was like there was a big question about whether the city council wanted them to do it or not, but it ended up happening, and now there's a new chapter of that satanic group in Louisiana, in that city. I think it was New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
So this is coming out of the military.
Okay.
It's part of the occult.
All right. So does this perhaps trace back to Colonel Michael Aquino?
Oh,
Are you familiar with that individual?
Absolutely. It traces back to the Jesuits. It traces back to Mesopotamia, to the Kabbalah and the Talmud, which were magic cult instruction books.
Mm.
And they recommended pedophilia in children, but they had to be under 8 years old. Mm. And it's in the Kabbalah and the Talmud. And properly practicing Jews, I'm not including them,
Mm-hmm.
They follow the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
The Talmud and the Kabbalah are satanic.
The Babylonian
cults.
Talmud. Is
Yes,
that what it is?
yes.
Okay.
Those are satanic cults.
And are those satanic cults controlled, or were they created by these ancient Iranian bloodlines?
Yes, they were.
Please
They were.
expand.
For instance, the Aldo Brandini is one of the ancient Iranian bloodlines. It's a famous Italian family.
Mm-hmm.
And Al-Dob, Al is the, Dob is devil,
Hmm.
Dini. Al-Dob,
The people of the devil.
Yeah, the people of the devil.
Wow.
So they're definitely satanic. They're proud of it. They're open about it. We have a website, LeurenMoret.info, and we have a Rothschild ball with photographs of the Rothschilds and their guests and members of their family doing satanic practices.
This is the mask ball photos?
The mask ball.
And by the way, they're called Venetian masks, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Now, she's saying that this all began with the Iranian bloodline, or the ancient Iranian black bloodline. It actually began with the knowledge that the fallen gave to man, and men began worshiping those beings in exchange for worship. So they gave them the secret knowledge. But now I want to go back and look at some things in Jubilees. This is coming from the book of Jubilees 8. In the 29th Jubilee, in the first week, in the beginning thereof, Arpachshad took to himself a wife, and her name was Resuya, the daughter of Susan, the daughter of Elam, and she bare him a son in the 3rd year in this week. And he called his name Canaan. Now, in other sources, you're going to see it as Canaan. It says, and the son grew, and his father taught him writing, and he went to seek for himself a place where he might seize or take for himself a city. And he found a writing which former generations had carved on the rock. And he read what was thereon, and he transcribed it and sinned owing to it, for it contained the teaching of the watchers, in accordance with which they used to observe the omens of the sun and moon and stars in all the signs of heaven. And he wrote it down and said nothing regarding it, for he was afraid to speak to Noah about it, lest he should be angry with him on account of it. So he knew what he found was something bad. This is why he was afraid to tell Noah about it. So he kept it. Now, this happened after men began to repopulate the earth after the flood. And he found this writing that the watchers left about the secret knowledge. Now, instead of revealing it to Noah, he hid it and obviously used it because it said he sinned in verse 3. But do you see that already there's some secrecy surrounding it? Do you think he passed this knowledge on to his descendants? Well, let's go on. I want to look at some information here from Time Maps regarding the history of Elam, and it says Iran before Persia, and it's talking about the area where they were, and they were in this area near modern day Iran, and it's near the Zagros Mountains. And it's talking about the proto or first Elamite period. It's talking about that area in Susa and Susiana, near the Susiana plain. So it says it was like southern Mesopotamia, ideally suited to irrigation agriculture. Also, the Iranian highlands to the north and east provided many of the raw materials lacking in the Mesopotamian highlands. And the majority of these came down trade routes into Mesopotamia by way of this plain. Unsurprisingly, a major urban center developed here at a very early date. This was Susa, and it puts the foundation around 4000 BCE. So it makes it as ancient as many of the Sumerian cities of Mesopotamia. Now, it also talks about how the city shared in the developments which gave rise to the Sumerian culture, the earliest in world history, and they had large walled towns, the appearance of the first true states, complex societies in which different groups were ranked according to status, wealth, power. They had monumental architecture, a much more sophisticated material culture, and most notably, literacy. Now, this information is going to be important. It talks about how the kingdom was organized, and it was divided into two parts. They had viceroys who were ruling from Susa, and the viceroys were royal princes and heir to the throne. Now, it says the king moved between these two centers. There was something else that it was known for, royal incest. It says another development within the royal family at this time was the apparently new practice of incest. Kings married their sisters and daughters, and queens and princesses their brothers and sons. The idea behind this was to ensure purity of royal blood, and thus to bolster the legitimacy of the dynasty. Princes born of such unions had a greater claim to the throne than others. Family. It says, this did not prevent one dynasty from being replaced by another, though whether by violence or because of failure of the royal line is not known. In any event, the new dynasty soon seems to have adopted this habit. Now, I'm sharing this because Leuren is going to be talking about some of this, and you're going to see how it all fits into this. So how did the kingdom end? It says the defeat of the Elamites seemed to have been less devastating than this person's name, Ashurbanipal's propaganda made it appear. A little while later, Elamite kings reappear in the Babylonian records, though from the beginning of the 6th century, they are simply referred to as king without any geographical designation. It is clear, in fact, that the land of Elam was in fact fragmented among different small kingdoms, though still perhaps in some kind of vassal relationship with the king in Susa. So it talks about, with the fall of the Assyrians and the rise of the Chaldean kings to the throne in Babylon, the kings of Susa seem to have acknowledged Nabopolassar's overlordship. Meanwhile, the Achaemenid kings in Anshan became vassals of the Medes. And then the land of Elam became politically divided. It would be reunited only in the mid-6th century when a king of Anshan named Cyrus had rebelled against his overlord, the king of the Medes, and then, after a decade conquering far and wide in Western and Central Asia, he conquered Babylon. This event caused many other lands to come under Persian rule, including Syria, Judea, and Elam. And as I said, this background information is going to be important as we go through this. So listen to her next video, and then all of this will begin to make sense.
We're talking about a global network with one template carrying all of this out. Mm-hmm. And it's originates with those ancient Iranian bloodlines. Mm-hmm. And they have 10 bloodline families that sit on a council, and they're the ones who advise the Jesuits. The Jesuits work for the Iranian bloodlines, and the Jesuits were created by Alessandro Farnese, who became Pope Paul III in the Renaissance, and Fidel Castro is pure Iranian ancient bloodline, and he's directly descended from Pope Paul III.
Okay, you're going to have to unpack that one for us here. Fidel Castro?
Fidel Castro.
The idol of all the left
Yes.
liberal progressives in
Yes.
academia?
Yes.
The liberator
Yes.
of, El Pueblo?
Yes.
That Fidel Castro?
That's Fidel Castro.
The one who is actually one of the richest, most wealthy person in the world?
He is from
Please.
He's from the papal nobility family.
Mm-hmm.
And he's from the Dukes of Castro. And Pope Paul III had 3 sons, and he gave each of them a dukedom. The Duke of Castro, the Duke of Piacenza, and which is a city in northern Italy. That's where Castro's father was born.
And you've done the genealogies.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Just so the
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen understand that
And-
this is just not fantasy. This is
And the third dukedom that Pope Paul III gave to his sons was the Duke of Parma.
So they start talking about these dukedoms and talking about dukes and chiefs. You know who they're talking about, right? We're talking about Esau here. So she's going to continue, but just remember, the barbarians came in and they replaced the original peoples who were there. They basically whited them out. But keep in mind, you're going to hear various groups she's talking about here that's going to really kind of paint the picture for you to see how these groups all tie back to an ancient bloodline.
These Mesopotamians, all of Eurasia, we know now from DNA studies done over the last 5 years, especially by Russia, all of Eurasia was settled by Central Asians.
Please talk a little bit about the DNA studies, and I assume that these studies are coming out of the Human Genome Project, right?
No, they wouldn't be coming out of the Human Genome Project, which is American. They're coming out of Russian scientific research.
All right, because
Yes.
this DNA, from our conversations,
Yes.
this DNA research provides the scientific backing that helps support this hypothesis or this theory in the making. It's irrefutable. It's ironclad, and I think this is probably the most important development in this type of research. It's hard science. It's not fantasy. It's supported by definitive DNA analysis, and you can trace the distribution of these different peoples, these different tribal groups, and how their culture and their religious practices migrated across the world, and how they have been transmitted to us down here to 2016 are embodied in people like Linda P.B. Katehi.
Right.
Please.
And so these ancient Iranian tribes moved into Europe and the Middle East. So the Basques are ancient Iranian bloodlines.
Is there a DNA
Yes, from the
report?
DNA.
Okay.
Yes. The Berbers in North Africa, in the Altai Mountains, the Basques, the Berbers, and the Kurds all came from the Hittites.
And there's DNA research on that?
Yes, this is from DNA research, and also language similarities.
All right.
And
So it's a multidisciplinary effort.
And blood
But the thing
types.
is, these disciplines are all compartmentalized.
They're compartmentalized.
You're achieving a grand synthesis of all this.
Yes, synthesize it.
Okay.
I've distilled the information
Right.
into a picture that makes sense.
Okay.
And it's all internally consistent as well.
All right.
So you take multi-factors, you start putting them together and relating them. And then you find more things. They introduce new things that you wouldn't have thought of. How could I ever think in a million years I knew that arboreal rice had to be from Iran? And but how would I ever imagine that investigating Katehi's origins would bring me to the source of arboreal rice in Iran?
Or the Familia Castro.
Yeah, or the Familia Castro.
The Farnese.
Yeah.
Right.
And so,
all the different linkages.
So, for instance, with Castro, this is a different kind of a DNA study, but it's physical characteristics and how powerful they are. I said, okay, Alejandro Farnese, or Pope Paul III, worked for a Borgia, and who was the Pope. And when that Borgia died, Lucretia Borgia was his daughter, the infamous Lucretia Borgia. And so when that Pope died, he made Alessandro Farnese a cardinal at 24, and then he made him Pope as his successor. And so I took photographs of paintings of Alessandro Farnese when he was young, and then when he was Pope, and then when he was a very old man as a Pope, in his 80s or something. And then I took paintings of his sons and their coats of arms. The coats of arms are always on the paintings. And then I collected Pope Paul III's grandsons, photos of them. They were cardinals. And then I found a painting of Fidel Castro in black, like a Spanish hat or a monk's hat, and a black robe with just a tiny white collar, peeking through. And I said, "What's this?" Well, it's his portrait, which will have his coat of arms added to it after he dies. Mm-hmm. And then that will be put in some palace in Italy.
Okay.
In Piacenza, one of their palaces in Piacenza. And then I said, okay, well, what happened in the Hellenic period is that the Farneses, one of them was one of the generals, one of the 8 generals who guarded Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great appointed him to be the governor. He was the governor of ancient Egypt. And when Alexander the Great died, he made himself a pharaoh. And Alexander the Great had given his sister to this general to marry. So they became the pharaoh and the pharaoh's wife. And after that, almost all the Farneses have a middle name or first name of Alexander, Alejandro, or Alessandro. So Castro's name is Fidel Alejandro Castro.
Now, family, a lot of this I've already been talking about, particularly when you connect the Edomites to the Etruscans, the Pharisees with the Talmud, and then when they start talking about dukes and chiefs. Now, when you connect that to these corrupt Roman Catholic popes, it's painting a picture. What were they doing with children anyway? They were supposed to be celibate. So let's take a listen as she's going to talk about the inbreeding.
Oh, when I got all these pictures together, and I had a photograph of Fidel Castro when he was a teenager or something with no facial hair. And so I got a painting of Philip I of Spain, the first Habsburg king of Spain. And he had a certain kind of lips. They were very thick, and they were sort of had vertical lines in them or folds. And that is a mutation. It's a genetic mutation. It's actually a defect. And I compared it to Fidel Castro's lips. He has Habsburg lips. It's indistinguishable. I mean, it's absolutely a bloodline. And then I did this to John Kerry. John Kerry's family were Jews in the Habsburg Empire in Czechoslovakia, and they were Hohenjude, house Jews. So they were very, very high in the court, and they advised the kings. Teresa Heinz Kerry is from a Portuguese Hohenjude family, and her family advised the Portuguese court. And then I found a painting of John Kerry's ancestor on his mother's side. She was a Forbes, not Malcolm Forbes.
The Opium family Forbes.
The Opium family.
The Yale Forbes.
And I found the first sea captain, Forbes sea captain, in 1823. This painting was painted, and it's in his house, which is now a museum in Boston. Those are the Boston Brahmins. They were the drug dealing captains, and I just couldn't believe it. Oh my God! That ancestor, Captain Forbes, who had 3 of the fastest clipper ships when he was 24, John Kerry looks exactly like him. So these are ancient bloodlines that they keep. They know how to breed, who to breed into the line, and how to keep the physical characteristics. How could someone 150 years later, 175 years later, how could John Kerry look exactly like him? That's like 10 generations or 8 generations. And then I realized they have very, very strict breeding programs. And for instance, with the royal families, the popes had to always give permission for 2 members of a royal family to marry. For instance, especially if they were on the throne. And there could be no relatives or family association for 7 generations, in order to marry. And when the Roman empires collapsed, the Western Empire collapsed first, the Eastern Empire collapsed in the 1500s, late 1400s. These ruling families wanted to reassemble the Habsburg Empire. Remember, the Roman Empire became the Habsburg Empire, and they wanted to recreate that Roman Empire, and they did it by intermarrying very closely related people, but they had to all have land that were pieces of part of the Holy Roman Empire. And so there was so much inbreeding in the Habsburgs. The Jesuits did it, actually, and they did it. One particular Habsburg prince, who was to be the emperor, Holy Roman Empire, had so much inbreeding that recently Germany did DNA studies on the whole Habsburg bloodlines, and they said he had the DNA of someone who had been the product of sex between a sister and a brother.
That's Egyptian, isn't it?
That's Egyptian.
That's a dynastic pairing.
Yes.
So what you're saying also, before we leave this point or move on past it, is that certain physical traits are also passed on.
Yes, they are.
They're telltale physical traits because of this breeding program, including mouth structure, in the case of Fidel, at the brow, the bridge, the nose structure. Yes,
intelligence, beauty. There are many, many characteristics that they're breeding for, but it can also be a way to wage war. So instead of waging all these wars to reunite the Habsburg Empire, the war was in bed.
Uh-huh.
So they did it through inbreeding.
And then they can reintegrate the empire.
Well,
or
after about
consolidate it.
after about 200 years, a bloodline will just die out because they're infertile from so much inbreeding. And so they would just take a cadet family, one of the other branches, and they'd plug them in. And so it was the same bloodline, but if you look at the Habsburgs, they all have strawberry blonde hair. It's reddish blonde.
So, family, remember we talked about how when Rome collapsed and they say Rome fell, we know that it didn't. It continued because they created the Holy Roman Empire. And that's where the AJs came in, because remember, they created the settlements along the Silk Road. They were the merchants and the banking families. So they were very much a part of this. And honestly, we can't say that things really change with them. It's still going on today where they have to get permission before they marry. Look at these two. And this wasn't happen chance here. They had to have priests who would approve this union, but they knew her bloodline. Of course, we're looking at her paternal line, but they allowed it because she was from of the cadet families that Lauren's talking about, one of the other branches that could be bred back into. Have you seen the pictures of their children? Look at the hair. And do you see how this is connecting to the information I shared earlier about Elam? They're using inbreeding to preserve their bloodline. Let's go on.
So this marriage between Grace Kelly, Irish Catholic, Irish American, and Prince Rainier of Monaco was really a homecoming.
Iranian bloodline.
It's a genetic homecoming.
Yes. It was right. Iranian bloodline.
And you had the power of the entire world focused on this. This was the biggest wedding until Princess Diana married Charles. This was like a world historical event. It was a fairy tale Princess Bride type of scenario.
Yes.
All right. So you had all that energy focused on the consummation of these lines that were coming back together and fusing.
They keep rebreeding the ancient stock, the chi in Italian, like
Medici.
Medici, chi means the stock, the bloodline you're from, or the tribe. It means DNA is what it means.
Right.
And it's always through the female. It's not through the male. It's through the female. And they also breed their animals through the female. That's the most important breeding in the breeding pair. The female is the most important.
Now, let's not miss this, family, because that's how the AJs determine, who is Ish and who isn't. It's through the mother. Why the breeding through the female? I talked about this previously, that legitimacy, they're using the legitimacy that comes through the maternal line. It's the mitochondrial DNA of Eve, because they can't claim rights through the paternal line. They didn't come from Adam's seed. So they exercise their right to rule through the woman. Think about the video I shared a while back about the seed of Moses and how the 5 daughters of Zelophehad were allowed to inherit land when they brought their case before Moses. The Most High allowed it because their father did not have a son to inherit his portion. So the daughters were given legitimate rights to the land. All right, let's go on.
They've had their own breeding program, especially through the universities. I had 53 marriage proposals at Davis and in the UC system, and I was going crazy. It was frightening me to death. I thought they were crazy. I didn't know why they were asking me to marry them. Well, they were Kuhn Loeb, the Kuhn Loeb banking family. They were, there was another one, a couple more. Anyway, they were all banking. Goldman Sachs. there was a Sax introduced to me in the geology department at Davis in Berkeley, and he said, "You're really a catch," and I didn't know what was going on. Mm-hmm. Now I understand. These are breeding programs.
And you were targeted.
Yes.
As a broodmare.
Yes.
That's how Diana Spencer described herself.
Yes. She was a broodmare.
She was a broodmare to help regenerate the,
she was a
decadent line of...
She was a broodmare because her biological father was Sir Jimmy Goldsmith. Sure. And the Goldsmiths and the Rothschilds came from Frankfurt, Germany in the mid-1700s to establish banking in London, to take over that banking center. Mm-hmm. And they intermarried. They are Iranians. They are not Jews. They're Iranians. And so that put the Iranian bloodline into the royal family of England. Mm-hmm. And we're going to find out, you see, Kate Middleton's mother's maiden name was Goldsmith. Mm-hmm. So they have a hidden history, too.
Sure.
And
there's a book, a fairly decent biography. It's called Billionaire, and it's about Sir James Goldsmith.
Yes.
And it will tell you about his marriages, his affairs, his dalliances.
Yes.
This might be slightly off topic, though, but it seems like bastardy is really important to understanding this. They breed outside of these family authorized lines. But how do these bastards, in this strict term, how do they figure into this ruling system?
Well, one of them is, one of those bastards is Hitler. He was a
Rothschild.
Rothschild.
Sure. I thought that was just an apocryphal...
No. Another one is Bill Clinton's mother, who was the illegitimate child of Winthrop Rockefeller, who was governor of Arkansas. That's why Clinton was president, and now Hillary Clinton. She's actually, her middle name was Rodham. I looked it up, and it was shortened from Brodowski, and she's from a Jewish family in Brodowski, Poland. Mm-hmm. And
wasn't that her stepfather, or her biological father?
Rodonsky was her natural father.
Okay. Yeah, because she also had a stepfather who was Jewish. I think.
Yeah. No, she's Eastern European.
So they were bred.
They were bred. That was a breeding.
Okay.
Yes, that was a breeding program.
And just out of curiosity, because this is in the news lately, there's some talk that Chelsea Clinton was the offspring of Webster Hubbell and Hillary Clinton. Who was Webster Hubbell? I don't know. I know he was an advisor to the Clinton family, but she's a dead ringer for Webster Hubbell.
Oh, well then...
She's not the child of Bill Clinton.
Nobody cares in those families. They just breed who they're told to breed to.
So why was Bill Clinton sterile, or he was unable to breed?
They didn't want that bloodline. They wanted the other one.
They wanted the Rodinsky one? Bloodline?
No, they wanted the Hubbell.
Interesting. Now think about why Hillary isn't touting her Jewish ancestry. Because remember, it comes through the mother, and she gets her ancestry through her father. So what she's saying here is they use the Ivy League schools for breeding programs. That's why she kept getting all of these marriage proposals. Interestingly, they knew her bloodline. She didn't. They knew the value before she did. Isn't that something? So that tells you that they are tracking the bloodlines. They know who they're looking for. So these women and men in these Ivy League schools, they are there so that they can arrange these matches. Now, interestingly, in the interview, if you listen to it, she's going to tell you that those who are in the Ivy League schools, they are preparing, when they match them to rule. But those who are in state schools, state universities, they are being trained to serve those who are going to be ruling. So the powers that be are approving marriages based on bloodline. And as you heard her say, if they need them to mate with someone to preserve a bloodline, they'll do it. They breed or they mate with whoever they tell them to mate with. because the bloodline is important. Family, 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 family. I want to look at some additional information because I shared this previously, so that we can really make sure we see how this is all fitting together. Genesis 1:26-28. And Yah said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So Yah created man in his own image. In the image of Yah created he him. Male and female created he them. And Yah blessed them, and Yah said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion. Who was he talking to? Adam only? It says he said this unto them. The male and female created he them. He told them to have dominion. So we see here from this passage that this is how they're trying to maintain legitimacy, since they can't do it through the paternal line because they don't have Adam's blood. They're using the maternal. That's why they keep focusing on the mother. They're using the maternal bloodline. I also want to go back to this study that I did from Frontiers regarding the study that was done on the AJs, when you look at their genetic structure to see how this fits in with what she's talking about. It says AJs were localized to modern day Turkey and found to be genetically closest to Turkic, Southern Caucasian, and Iranian populations. Now you see the connection. Iranian populations, suggesting a common origin in Iranian Ashkenazi lands. It also talks about how they gained power using the Silk Roads. They were using the settlements. This is where they were making money. So during the Dark Ages, when Europeans just began creating their own history out of thin air, when they were creating this Holy Roman Empire, that's when they just kind of show up in Germany. You know, they're the people, and we see these things passing down. And she's talking about this ancient bloodline that we see today, but what does it point back to? What does it point back to? So that's something that we definitely need to keep in mind. Now listen to this next one.
Wow.
And so Katehi was the introduction of overt takeover of not only UC Davis, but of the University of California and of all universities in the U.S., the land-grant universities, by the Jesuits and Monsanto. You see, the Jesuits created Monsanto, and Monsanto now is building buildings all over the Davis campus with their name on the buildings, and you see more and more administrators who have that Jesuit look. They have a look. This is an excellent book, The Secret History of the Jesuits. It's by Edmund Paris. This is what the Jesuits did to 68 countries in Europe, destroyed them in the 1800s. And then they came to the U.S., and they're doing the same thing now here. Mm-hmm. And
could you describe the look?
The physical look is wire rim glasses. It's all minimalization. Mm-hmm. It's a real stretched skin, sort of, very clean shaven, and then just hair short and slicked back. It's just a real clean cut look. I noticed that a lot of the people who go to Bohemian Grove have that same look. Mm. So those are the financiers and economists and the people who drive the economy, they have that same look.
Okay.
Now, Obama, everyone in his administration, 10% of Congress, they have all been Jesuit trained.
Wow. Wow. Now, hopefully you all are not surprised about Obama being Jesuit trained. Hopefully not. They don't get to those levels without being connected. And that's why I say don't focus on skin color. It's about the bloodline. But he's not the only one. This Time article says, here's a quiz. What do Donald Trump, Tim Kaine, and Pope Francis have in common? Answer, all three men were educated by Jesuits, a religious order of Catholic priests whose most famous member is the Pope himself. Family. Ooh, family. We should not be surprised by what's going on here. And we can see why Jeremiah 16:19 says the Gentiles will come from the ends of the earth and say, surely our fathers have inherited lies. Their entire history is a lie, but their leaders know the truth. How is it that all of these presidents are related? That's telling you right there. They're protecting an ancient bloodline. So Europeans created a history to hide their true ancestry, their connection to the fallen. Now, over time, genetic variations or genetic drift, it caused some to lose certain physical characteristics of the Nephilim. Now they're doing a slow release to get people used to the idea about the sky people, the sky gods, the Anunnaki. And they are masters at marketing. So they're going to sell it like it's the best thing since sliced bread. Let's go on. I want to look at this information here regarding ancient Rome because in some aspects, they tell the truth about certain things, but folks just don't believe it. They call it myths. But when you research the ancestry of the Romans, you're going to run into brick walls when you try to find out who the ancestor of Romulus and Remus was. But it says, according to legend, ancient Rome was founded by two brothers and demigods, Romulus and Remus. Now, when you read that, it's all, that's fiction. That's just a myth. But is it? Is it? When they talk about evolving, they evolved from something else. Is it just a myth? We thought they were talking about us, but no, they're talking about themselves. They became something else over time. So we really need to go back over these things and see how they have been creating a history to hide their true ancestry. But again, they're about to do this great reveal because now they want people to know where they really came from. Scientists talk about genetic mutations that led to the white race. It says, imagine a world where everyone had brown skin. Tens of thousands of years ago, that was the case. So then what happened? It says, so how did white people get here? It says the answer lies in that tricky component of evolution known as a genetic mutation. Now, it's interesting that those who are on the continent didn't seem to have all these genetic mutations. So when we look at scripture, We can see things like the curse of leprosy that caused the skin to turn white. We also see albinism, but what else? And this is the part they don't want to focus on. What happened in Genesis 6? That's a major factor. They don't want to talk about blood that came from elsewhere, that they did not descend from the seed of Adam. The other thing they don't want to talk about is the curse that was placed on the fallen and their seed. This is the reason for the continued feudalism, constant fighting. Let's read this from Jubilees 7:22. And they, speaking of the watchers, begat sons, the Nephidim, and they were all unalike. And they devoured one another, and the giant slew the Nephil, and the Nephil slew the Eljo, and the Eljo mankind, and one man another. Why is there always warfare? Constant fighting. They began feuding with each other and wiping each other out because a curse was placed on them. That curse didn't go away. They're still at it today, fighting amongst themselves and fighting with everyone else. But somehow they managed to keep their ancient bloodline intact because they were passing on the secret knowledge. They were worshiping angels. Now, all of them have different names for these beings that they were worshiping, but it points back to the same source. So we're going to wrap up with some excerpts from this journal article called The Angel of Light in the Dark Ages. And it's talking about the bond between Archangel Michael and the formation of the European civilization. Your wheel should already be turning because these things happened in the Middle Ages when Europeans began creating their own history. Why did they have such fascination with angels? So it says the present study analyzes the role of three apparitions of Archangel Michael during the 5th to the 10th centuries AD, during this period of time called the Dark Ages. So people kept getting these revelations. And when I say people, we're really talking about Roman Catholics. They were receiving these revelations supposedly from Michael. So it created this Saint Michael's cult. And people began flocking to different churches because they were believing in Saint Michael as their guardian angel. It goes on to talk about the first angelophany, and that's really just a word for appearances of angels to humans. But the first angelophany of Archangel Michael in Western Europe takes place in 490 in the region of Apulia, basically in southeastern Italy. So it says the guiding apparitions of this angelic chief prince begin with an angelophany in the Mount Gargano's cave. There, St. Michael reveals himself as the eternal protector of the place to a certain shepherd named Garganus. So this event takes place where supposedly he's chasing a bull that's been disturbing his cattle, and he shoots an arrow at it to kill it. But St. Michael is standing there near the cave, and he turns the arrow in the opposite direction, and it hits this man in the shoulder. So at the same time, it says the angel of the Lord rebuke Garganus that the holy cave, the cave now, should not be desecrated by bloodshed. The event will generate astonishment among the Scythiones and also a special devotion for the head of the angels. Now it goes on to talk about the bond between divine providence, Archangel Michael, and the European destiny. It says, why have we talked so far about all these free-founding angel of fame, Ophanes. It occurred during 500 years, or when it occurred during these 500 years. It says, it is worth noting that all these angelic discoveries are not accidental. They hide a great coherence, especially a plan of divine providence manifested through the holy angels and Saint Michael's. They seem to prepare the European fate behind the scenes of this world through the archangel's apparitions, which contribute in a very subtle way to the first shapes of the European civilization. So the holy angels in Saint Michael, they're appearing to these Europeans, and they see it as a plan of divine providence. Now, I know some of you are shaking your head right now, but they believe this was God's way of leading them to their destiny. For example, manifest destiny. It was the idea that white Americans were divinely ordained, or I should say Europeans, were divinely ordained to settle the entire continent of North America. And what was at the root of it, family? The belief in American cultural and racial superiority. That's what the man was talking about when he said African Americans are not Americans. They see this land as something that was given to them by the Most High. So Michael, the archangel, was leading and guiding them along the way. Let's go on. So they began building these various monasteries, and they say these buildings were based on angelic intelligence. Need I say more? They're getting instructions and information, and they say it was based on angelic intelligence. So as I said, it led to the worship of Michael. They see him as the head of the heavenly militia. So it says in the New Testament, Saint Michael appears in the book of Revelation. He fights and defeats a dragon, symbol of the devil. To medieval man living in expectation and dread of the hereafter, Saint Michael was the one who led away the dead and put their souls in the balance on the day of the last judgment. Very widespread in the East from the 4th century, the worship of Saint Michael only appeared in the West, in the late 5th century, with the building of the first sanctuary at Monte Gargano in Italy. Again, these things are happening in Italy. So it says they see Michael basically as their guardian angel. It was only the warlike angel who could fight against the Protestant heresy. In Christian iconography, Saint Michael is often depicted holding a sword and a set of scales. Popular traditions and cults have made Saint Michael the patron saint of knights and of all guilds associated with arms and scales. The statue that stands on top of the belfry has the traditional attributes of the archangel. It was made in 1897 by the sculptor Emmanuel Fremiet and commissioned by the architect Victor Pettigran, who wanted to see the new 32-meter steeple suitably crowned. So what are we talking about here, family? Because scripture tells us that the archangel Michael is the great prince who stands watch over Israel. He's chosen to defend and protect Israel, our people, not the Gentile nations. So Harpo, who this? Who was this angel directing Europeans to do certain things? Folks, they have been telling us all along where they're getting their knowledge. They've been telling us they are worshiping fallen angels. The holy angels of the Most High do not receive worship. These fallen angels have been presenting themselves in various forms, And they've been giving the other nations knowledge in exchange for something, because it's not free. There's a price to pay. We're on the precipice of seeing Daniel's vision come to fruition. These are the days of transhumanism. The fallen wants to come out into the open now. They don't want to remain behind the curtain anymore. And these nations will acknowledge their paternal ancestry and the bloodline that came from elsewhere. The ruling elite are putting everything in place for the grand announcement. In the times of the Fourth Empire, the legs of iron and 10 toes, we're talking about the Roman Empire, we see how iron is trying to mix with clay. We're also told that it will not hold together. You would think that these folks would be terrified of this, but I'm hearing more and more comments about how excited they are. They can't wait. In one video, there was this couple who did their DNA, and the wife found out that she was Rh negative. And there was another person there with them who did her tests, and she was upset because she said she really wanted to be an alien. You can best believe that there are some who are welcoming this. The talking heads have been making it seem like it's something glorious. They want to be extra. They want an advantage over everyone else because they're superior. Just being a man or a woman, the way the Most High created us, is not enough. They need to be trans. There's a reason why Elam is out in front right now. Just look at how people are actually signed up for Neuralink. Well, they're going to get what they're asking for, and once it's done, there's no turning back. They will become one with their Father, and their final end will be with their Father in hell fire. So there's much more to share on this family, but time will only allow for so much. I'm still working on trying to put some of those shorts out that will point back to the earlier videos on a lot of these topics, but the research is just requiring so much time. But I will get there, Yah willing. Just know that I appreciate those of you who share the information and those of you who support the ministry. Thank you to those of you who support us with your gifts. Know that it's very much appreciated. I am not going to have time to look at the comments and read them tonight because I have another matter that I need to attend to. But just thank you for listening. Take the time to go over the information and see how it connects with what we already know about us and what we already know about them. The pieces of the puzzle are coming together, and it's giving us a clearer picture so that we can see what we're dealing with in these last days. So again, peace and blessings to all of you. Thanks to all of you who stuck with it this long, an hour already. But it's important information that we need to know about the fallen and their descendants. So join me next time, family.